I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Environment and Sustainability Overview and Scrutiny Panel, officers, members of the public and press in attendance at today's meeting of 9th March 2023. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping note.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available online for a minimum of 12 months. There are ambient microphones in this meeting room, therefore all speaking will be captured and broadcast via the live stream. I would therefore remind everyone present to speak clearly when invited to by the Chairman. Please switch any mobile devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings during the meeting, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit. Please go to the fire assembly point, which is located at the bottom of the car park by the garages.
Right, thank you. Any apologies for absence?
We have received apologies from Councillors Jackie England and Malcolm Wade.
Anyone else?
Malcolm Wade? I think Malcolm sent apologies to...
Yes, but Malcolm.
Yeah,
Thanks, Deputy. Item 1, minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of January 2023. Members of the panel, are we in agreement with the minutes as accurate? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Item 2, the usual declarations of interest, and any members, whether they do have an interest to declare, do so now, but if it only occurs to them at the time of the subject coming up on the agenda, I will listen to what they have to say beforehand. Item 3, public participation, there is none. Item 4, council portfolio holders' reports and performance dashboard. We have 2 portfolio holders, Councillor Dan Andrews and Councillor Steve Davis. And I'll be a gentleman. Councillor Andrews, would you like to deliver your dashboard, please?
Thank you, Chairman. My report today will bring focus on the work that has been achieved within my portfolio recently. In October last year, the Cabinet considered and agreed that a report should be prepared on the future allocation of Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL. It was agreed that to comply with the Conservation of Habitats and Species regulations, SIL money should be spent on projects to diminish the impact of new residential development in the New Forest, Southampton Water and the Solent European designations. Each year, a range of projects from the approved projects list have been delivered, funded from SIL contributions. The Council already holds these funds, so there's no further cost to this Council. Should the projects not proceed, then officers will need to identify alternative projects to ensure that the contributions held are delivered on other suitable schemes to enable the Council to comply with the habitat regulations. There are 11 projects, and these are intended to increase pedestrian activity in areas that are underused or don't currently have public access. There are 1 in Hythe, 4 in Totton, 4 in Lymington and 2 in New Milton. They'll be convenient, attractive and safe to use while increasing footfall and providing improved safety and security. The total being spent on these 11 projects is £850,000. I think you'll agree this will make a real improvement to those living in these areas. Totton Community Engagement. I'd like to share with you the results of the community engagement exercise that explored the ways in which Totton Town Centre could be improved. The engagement was organised around the 4 very different and distinctive geographies in the town centre. A total of 874 responses were received from around 250 different contributors. There were key themes: to reduce congestion and to change the road space, to improve connectivity within the town and encourage walking and cycling. 7 key themes emerged, ranging from problems with the railway level crossing to upgrading the area around the library, police station and the community centre. There is a keen sense of community in Totton. It has the potential to be a really lovely place to live and visit. It combines certain urban qualities, such as the civic centre area, and identifies as a town, yet people love the local community and the village feel as easy access to nearby wild spaces. This is a project that may take many years, but it's now been suggested that could be immediate quick wins to make changes now. For instance, better signage, route maps for those walking in the town, community events held in the centre of the town, a Totton walking festival, and to identify how Testvale Park and the surrounding area could be enhanced to give a sense of community. These suggested quick wins will be funded through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Going forwards, a more detailed master planning project will be commissioned during 2023, and this will bring together specialist advice on urban design, transport, viability, retail and employment needs, together with advice on market demand and deliverability. It's important that communication and engagement continues. There is a budget for Town Regeneration Officer to enable cooperation with all partners and, of course, Totton Town Council. Finally, Chairman, the Climate Change SPD. Following the Council declaring a climate and nature emergency, it was felt that a new, updated document was necessary to support the implementation of climate change policies in the adopted local plan. It's an important part of this Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan. The SPD clarifies how developers should address climate change in planning applications in order to meet local plan requirements by achieving sustainable development. It does so by setting out best practice approaches or standards that developers are encouraged to target or adopt. This paper covers subjects such as drought resistance, flooding, sustainable transport, energy efficiency in new buildings, including net zero carbon. I'd like to thank the team for a clear, easy to read and understand document. Its 105 pages are full of constructive information for the industry. This really is an excellent document, and there will be a consultation which I encourage all parties to engage in. Chairman, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diana Tris. Members of the panel, have you any comment? Eric first, please.
Is there anywhere we can see these projects that the 11 projects that you said?
Absolutely. They're attached to the Cabinet agenda from 1st of March.
Right.
So if you look at that, scroll down because you don't see them at first. So keep trying.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Derek?
Yeah, that's
Alan?
Yeah, just looking at the performance indicators, page 5, key performance indicators. I see that we're behind on getting car charging points. That's Steve.
Yes.
It is, but by all means, go to council.
I'll get the question out there anyway. Yeah, now I've done this yakking. Yeah, I just wondered, why are we behind and what are we doing to catch up on it?
I will mention that when I come to my report, councillor.
So Councillor Glass.
Thanks for the heads up.
We'll wait. We'll wait for the councillor's report.
Okay.
I look forward to as many charges as possible. That's the class.
You drive an electric car and I've just ordered one.
Good.
Yeah, oh dear.
No self-interest there then, Councillor Glass.
Declare.
I think we'll move on before it gets any
He didn't
deeper.
declare an interest, though, did he, Chairman? So
No, he didn't. Oh, we'll note that.
He hasn't got a car yet, though.
I haven't.
We'll note it for the future. Councillor Steve Davies, please.
thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon. Obviously, the performance chart has been sent around. I'll take questions on that. I will comment on a couple of points. I was thinking about commenting on the number of recharging points as well, Chairman, to be honest with you. We are slightly held up awaiting connection on 3 of those, and I'll mention those in my script just now. What I'm particularly pleased though, and I'm sure the panel will agree, is that the high risk areas, which are shown at the bottom of the 4 high risk areas, have all been mitigated down to amber by the officers by taking control of the concerns. So I'm delighted to see that. So I'd like to commend them for that.
Agreed.
Over the past couple of months, Chairman, climate and sustainability obviously has become even more significant. Last week, I was delighted to attend the CCNE, that's the Climate Change Nature Emergency presentations in Lyndhurst last week. This was arranged by Roxy King, who is our climate change manager. This event brought together interested parties, not just in the New Forest, but much wider areas. And one of the presenters was a fascinating person who actually described the community energy plans. This is from Community Energy South. And I do, if these presentations are released, I do commend people to actually look at these. There's quite a brilliant concept, and I hadn't realised it was so well advanced. One of the things I was very pleased to see there, though, was thermal imaging cameras. This is something that I've been mentioning quite a few times over the past few months. It was first shown on television, and then it excited people in New Milton on the social media sites because the thermal imaging camera can be used from outside a building to detect which parts of the house are white. In other words, to detect the roof efficiency. But also they can be used from inside the house. Not all of them. Some of them are quite big, these cameras. But she had 3 different versions: the £7,000, the £500, and the £200 version, I think it was. But they all showed inside the Lymington Community Hall. They showed which parts were white and which parts were red. And the remarkable thing is, the roof is well insulated, apart from, she pointed towards the smoke detector, which had to be in buildings, and around that it was blue. And that's because when they inserted the smoke detectors, they didn't put the material back in there to actually keep it warm. So again, this kind of tool can be used within houses as well. And apparently we are going to acquire them, and they are going to be let out to people to actually use. But I recommend this also to the housing team. I've already done this because when they do their annual survey of our housing stock, they could obviously when the weather's cold outside, they could easily detect which parts of the house are in fact losing heat as opposed to holding heat. So that was a great experience. In terms of coastal protection, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm attending the next round of the Hurst to Lymington strategy. And this is an Environment Agency-led strategy that looks at that plans for the 21st century sort of protection of Lymington from Hurst Castle all the way down to the railway bridge at Lymington. This is just one of the strategies that's ongoing right now. The all-day meeting will be working with local interest groups, making sure that all their thoughts and concerns are considered while the panel came up with suitable options. I will be there, but not taking part as such, because that's on the day after PERDA starts. Car parking. Well, how can I not talk about car parking? It's not the same without him, actually. However, delighted to say that Marine Drive West, Paddy's Gap and Bewley Village are now all awaiting their charging points to be connected. So they have the most of the work being done there, and they should be up and running before Easter. You'll be delighted to know, Chairman, that the ultra rapid charging hub at Ringwood has gone to a planning application because it does require installation of a small substation with its own cabinets. But it will make a massive difference to Furlong's capability. Similarly, the planned rapid charging points at St Thomas Street, which is in Lymington, are a little way behind Furlong, but are being progressed. And I know our team are negotiating with SSE to get the right amount of electricity. I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge for most car park charging points, I think. But what I was advised as well by David Hurd that the EVCP usage continues to increase. And the latest to come online was Hurst Road East in Milford, which is already being well used. So that's all positive news. You'd be delighted to hear, Councillor.
Thank you.
On beach huts, I joined Steve Cook and his team for a rummage around for an inspection of the beach huts. The first one was at Hordle Cliff, where the scene of devastation during the last two storms. Well, things haven't improved that much either, quite frankly. The cliff, some of the cliff area is quite, I think it's safe to say, unsafe and has been taped off. But Steve and his team are all over that and making sure that everything's kept safe. We then also, the following week, went to visit Milford and looked at those new handrails that are installed outside the concrete huts, as it were, on the cliff. And I think they've done a fantastic job there. I mean, they actually look good. And when I was walking there with one of the officers, not Steve, but it was with Carol, I said to her, can you imagine now if they were taken away, how dangerous the place would look? So I think they've done a great job there. So again, hands up to you, and hats off to Steve Cook and his team for getting that sorted. So that's all I have, Chairman.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any panel members want to raise a question? Eric.
The charging in the car parks, are we charging customers, or is it free? And are we still getting them put in free? Because I believe the first ones were free, weren't they?
Yes, they're all installed for free.
Mm-hmm.
There is a cost to us because obviously we lose car parking spaces.
Yeah.
That's the only cost. They'll be completely ours after 15 years, but we do get a cut of the charge made to the customer for recharging. So there is a small recompense. But
so the customers pay a charge, but it's cheap.
They pay to charge, and the charging company gives us a bit off the top.
Okay.
Apart from Ringwood, of course, where I was told you are going to actually construct 12 new places in the car park to replace the ones being lost to the ultra-fast driving places that you've got. So it's not all loss.
I know they're constantly being maintained and updated, but I know Furlong is probably if you like, is probably the best area for car park and charging, in my opinion, maybe because it is off the A31. Mm-hmm. So when people are coming down to visit the West Country, where's the obvious place to stop? If you follow the ZAP map, as far as I'm concerned, it is not on the motorway charging points, which would be more expensive, but certainly the NFDC charging points at Furlong, where they can also pop along for a coffee or whatever while it's charging. So I think that's one of the perfect places, well sited.
Yes, you make it sound wonderful.
It is, if only I could afford one, unlike some members.
There might be some second-hand ones soon.
Batteries will be worn out.
Was there anybody else on the panel? Yes, sorry, it's Sue. Please.
Yeah, I sat on the task and committee when we first looked at these charging points, and I think the company with Jojo we were working with, I think that's probably changed over the years. But the question I wanted to ask is, at that time, the supply of electricity was coming from truly sustainable sources. Is that still the case?
Yeah, it's Jojo are the facilitators that put the actual boxes in. Yeah. The actual provider of the electricity is a company called Mør, which is a Norwegian company, and they do in fact put in sustainable electricity into the interconnector in Northumberland, which then feeds into our network.
Okay. So the answer to that is yes.
It's very much yes.
Good.
A long way around, but yes.
Yeah. I got there in the end.
You did, yes. Yes, thank you, Steve. Excellent. Yes, right. Moving on, item number 5, nitrates, phosphates and biodiversity net gain update.
Yeah, thank you. A presentation up. So this item has come to panel this afternoon, I think following a discussion at the previous panel, pressed by Councillor England, a little bit more, what was the implications for other land uses by these mitigation projects. So just to sort of step members back as to why we're going to do all this, but we've got two issues across our district. The purple area, the River Avon, which is a phosphates issue, and the Solent phosphates. So what's happening? There's excess quantities of phosphates or nitrates going through wastewater treatment plants, not caused by development necessarily, but various reasons. Future new development is having to state that it is neutral, therefore not. So, lucky us, we've got two issues: phosphates, which has been an issue for the district since 2018, and then nitrates has been an issue across the Solent since 2019. We did have a little tiny chunk of the district that's hatched in purple where any of these problems till about November last year, when through a piece of work in Christchurch, it was demonstrated that Christchurch Harbour of the district. So just to go on to the next slide. So it's a very, very complicated matter, because whilst we think that water runs in straight lines, yes, different areas have different catchments. So to the within the nitrates side, we've got effectively sort of 4 different areas, so 4 different catchment treatment plants flowing through. And for that reason, I'll come on in a minute, we need different solutions across geographies. The issue with phosphates is slightly easier, and we've only got 2 different treatment plants. The water flows through. Next slide. So I'll deal first of all with the phosphates issue. Colleagues have been working collaboratively across Wiltshire to try and find some solutions to the phosphates problem since the end of 2018. Wiltshire sort of took a little bit of a leap of faith and said that they would solve the problem themselves, and have looked at their own land holdings to solve that problem. You said women can't mark. With nitrates, so with phosphates, the private sector as well has been working really hard. And why the private sector has been particularly driven to do this is that we've been able to grant no permissions for new residential units across the Avon Valley since 2018. And as you all know, we've got real issues around housing delivery, and obviously our economy in part is based on things. So if they can't build anything, it impacts on. So the private sector has leaped ahead, and one of our major developers acquired Bicton Fish Farm, which was a 1970s style fish farm. So they've made loads of sort of concrete tanks over a long period of time, and because it is of that age, they have now found themselves in a position where the fish farm was in breach of almost every EA regulation. So the developers have acquired that site, have taken the fish farm out of production, and in just simply doing that, have actually increased the state, improved the state of water quality within that catchment, and are now then able to sell credits to developers to enable them to do their developments. Within the Solent, we've got a slightly more complex set of projects that stretch across the wider geography. And so we have a number of live projects, all sit outside the district at the moment, but these projects are effectively selling credits to developers, not only within our district, but across the whole of the Solent area, to enable development to happen. James, if you go to the next slide. So to just try and just capture where those projects are, bit of a busy map, but the numbers on the map are different projects that are delivering nitrate mitigation across the Solent area, and the ones that are useful and most useful to us are the ones on the Isle of Wight, and the one number 5 and also number 6. But the other projects to the east are helping to mitigate development geography, South Hampshire. So I think the question that had come from Councillor England was really, what does this mean for taking particularly good quality agricultural land out of production? So you will sort of see that there is a little table there. So grade 1 and 2 agricultural land is best quality land, and grade 3 is land that is of least value to farmers and to growing crops and farming animals. So you'll see that of those projects, 92% are on land that's grade 3 land, so less useful for production. To the next slide. And then in terms of where we are, at the moment, we haven't got any live nitrates projects, but there is one that is in close to development stroke delivery stage at Key Haven. As you all know, members, we took the bold step back in 2020-21 to be one of the first authorities to actually require biodiversity net gain to be through development. We felt that was the right thing to do as a council, and it would align with our climate and nature emergency and also the environment bill. So we have been requiring biodiversity net gain on larger projects across the district. So the plan shows, and might not be able to quite differentiate between the blues, but we have the project, the Solent Gateway, commercial site where they were required to deliver biodiversity net gain, and they are delivering the project as part of the Cadland Estate. The Forley Power Station, which you're all really familiar with, has significant biodiversity net gain projects within that scheme, and that's all hatched in blue. And as part of our evolving project, which is owned and promoted by a private landowner, have biodiversity net gain projects and therefore credits that will be sold to the development industry at Key Haven. I think it's probably just worth mentioning that with biodiversity net gain, can actually deliver your mitigation in theory anywhere in the country. To sort of protect ourselves a little bit, because we feel that if we have biodiversity net gain projects that are being sold to the development industry, they should be enabling growth within our district. The legal agreement, joint legal agreement with the National Park and the landowner, a high percentage of those projects be sold to support development within our district. And so that's a little bit of a rattle-stop tour of something that is a really, really complicated project. But I hope, in terms of the sort of the question I think I was asked to answer, it's only a very, very small amount of high-quality agricultural land that's being used for nitrates and phosphorus projects.
Thank you, Claire. Members of the panel, any comment? Derek?
Presumably, the whole point of this exercise is to reduce the level of nitrates in the Solent, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And presumably then we are constantly monitoring those levels, are we?
We as a council aren't, other bodies are. So this all comes through requirements through the habitats regs, and because the Solent has protected habitats within it, it's the impact of that increased nitrates on those protected habitats. So we as a council are not.
So we know
monitoring
the level of nitrates as they exist in the zone because of all the measurements that have been taken, and presumably then we will see whether this project is going to have an effect on the solent levels of nitrates. How soon do you think we will know whether this is having any effect?
I think it will take some considerable period because if we look at this in terms of time frame, there was no growth whatsoever because of this nitrate issue across the whole of Solent for a couple of years. So these developments are only beginning to come online. Development takes a period of time. It isn't happens immediately, and development at any scale is going to take probably another 2, 3, 4 years to start actually seeing the impact of what's happening.
As a result of these measures, are we expected the nitrate levels to remain more or less as they are, or are we expecting them to drop?
So all we're trying to achieve through this is nitrate neutrality. The government will be dealing with the issue of permitting and discharge for water companies through the wastewater treatment plants in the planning and regen bill. So there's some different measures that will come into place that will hit the water industry.
We've had a lot of problems, haven't we, with runoff in heavy rainfall and discharges of filthy effluent into the rivers and the sea.
Yeah.
And I presume that's a completely separate
That's
issue.
a completely separate issue.
But that must have a big bearing on the nitrate levels, I would
You're
think.
absolutely right. If you're not treating sewage and you're just dumping it straight into the water, it certainly has a much more significant effect than treating it. But that is a separate matter, and you'll be familiar with the prosecution of Southern Water last year, where they were fined the highest fine that's ever been charged.
Well, I hope that we will see these figures over the years. And I look forward to seeing whether they decrease, stay the same, or whatever. But it'd be interesting as a panel if we can see the figures.
Yes, indeed, because at the moment what we've been discussing is holding the line rather than actually making positive inroads into reducing the amount. That's clearly a national issue more than it is a local one, but clearly our involvement, because we're very much involved with the sea and the rivers.
We're right by the sea, aren't we, Charlie?
Indeed, so I think it's a note to make for future panel meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Dan.
One of the things I'd like to say is that whilst the water boards get these huge fines, we don't see any of the money at all to mitigate the damage that's been done here. And I would think this is something that is totally unacceptable. The fine was huge and we didn't see a penny of it. And I think that is wrong.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. It's a point that was discussed at some length through the PUSH Joint Committee, because we've been working collaboratively on this issue, working with government and ministers. So there was a letter that went to government saying that actually Southern Water, the environment agency have got this big pot of money from this fine and that they should actually reinvest in solving this problem. That didn't happen, but that said, through the environment agency, through DEFRA, the Solent PUSH received £200,000 grant funding last year, a little bit on the back of the noise we've been making through PUSH and escalating it to ministerial level. So we received that funding, and through that funding have been able to recruit 2 officers to work across the whole of the geography of PUSH. And the reason in part why we actually created that role at the PUSH level was that what we were finding as individual councils was that we were sort of getting played off against each other, and that nobody had an overview of where the projects were, what was happening when. So we put that resource in place and received that funding from DEFRA to make that post a sustainable post.
As good as it is, 200,000 is.
It's not very much, is it? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Steve.
Okay, well, thank you. I can't quite make out the legend, Claire. The hallowed turf of New Milton, there's 3 green bits there, bottom left-hand corner. Can you describe what they are?
Right.
That's what to the thing. You didn't have to do it now if you don't want to.
Legend. So we've got, so in terms of the green bits, that's the agricultural land grade. So the dark green is grade 1 land. So that's really high quality agricultural land. The lighter green is grade 2 agricultural.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, now I know exactly what you're pointing at. Okay.
And
Right,
where,
thank
hopefully.
Just to say that, the Review and Scrutiny Committee Chairman for the amount of talking that's been going on about this mitigation is phenomenal. But the thing that disappoints me is, although we're mitigating it, we're not doing anything to cure it, get rid of it. You know, we're not moving forward as far as I can see. We're just keeping afloat.
Right.
Do you want me to respond on that?
Really, Claire?
I think the difficulty is if you go back to who's caused these pollutants, a lot of pollutants in the first place was caused agricultural practices, and the EA have been working with communities to begin over like decades to actually change agricultural practices, reduce the amount of fertiliser, type of fertiliser that's being used, so that you're not getting those pollutants. But ultimately, it's water companies and the wastewater treatment plants license that enables them to not clean the water up as much as they should maybe be doing, that's causing the problem. The development industry itself isn't part of the problem, but it isn't really the entire problem. And there was a lot of discussion when this first happened, you know, at a national level. Why are you hitting developers when actually it's water companies and the way managing their business that actually is causing this issue? So, you know, at the moment, the development industry is consuming their own smoke because they can only ever do that. And in doing so, obviously, that puts quite significant cost of development, which then potentially impacts on other things you're seeking to achieve through development, usually affordable. So it's that, you know, bigger, wider argument that, you know, at a national level, should it be the development industry that's bearing the cost for it, or should you actually go to the source of the issue, which is the water company? And that's why the government are proposing through the 11th Gen Bill to actually hit the water companies a bit harder with the issue.
So I understand also that in human waste.
Yes, that's what I'm getting letters
There's
about that as well.
lots
I
of
know it's the same
pollutants.
agriculture, but
Yeah, no, it's how they're treating human waste. So they're only treating it down to a, I don't know,
15,
grade 2.
15 more
rather than-
years, the sewage dumping's allowed is what I'm getting written to about.
Yeah, sewage dumpings onto land. You know, that's why they go through waste treatment plants to actually treat what's there.
Yeah.
But it's the standard to which it's treated.
Going to come up, I think, at other panel meetings, but Sue, you wanted to ask a question.
Well, it's not so much a question, it's more an observation, if I may.
Right.
I was recently watching a programme on television. I think it was done by Paul Whitehouse, I think was his correct name. And he was looking at pollution in rivers and so on and so forth in the north of the area. I think he's going to be in future programme looking elsewhere. But it was quite an eye-opener in as much as wastewater treatment companies, whilst they can discharge at certain times, heavy rainfall and so on, into rivers, they obviously monitored these sites. And it was clear that these wastewater treatment companies were discharging untreated sewage directly into rivers. And there was photographic evidence of it. Now, I know Southern Water's been fined and so on and so forth, but do we know what Southern Water legally can discharge into the Solent? And do we know whether they fall foul of that by discharging at times when they shouldn't be?
Yeah, so we know what the parametering is on each of the wastewater treatment plants, but it's not the same on each plant. There's no evidence of any unauthorised disposal in Southampton or in our area, but we know that there have been unauthorised discharges in Langston and around the Hayley area. So yes, there have been across the wider geography, but not in our area.
And whose responsibility would it be to monitor that and do something about
It's
it?
the Environment Agency's role, so we don't.
No,
It's not our
no.
role as a district council.
But do we know whether they
They-
actively
They
do
actively do that. A
vigorous scale?
vigorous scale, and then you've also got various interest groups. So you've got things like the Windsurfers and Kitesurfers Against Pollution type people who are
Yeah.
also do their own monitoring
Yes.
and are very active lobbyists in
So somebody's keeping a close eye. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Yeah, like Sue, I'm questioning things. I don't really know a lot, but I was told that water companies actually collect their own pollution. They check their own pollution and report it. They take samples of the least polluted, and they have an acronym from it, which is OSM. So I'm just interested to think that we all felt the Environmental Agency were checking the air, checking the water. That's not actually quite true.
but they have their companies have been monitoring their own discharge because it's their business.
In my area, obviously we've got water very close to us, and people are getting quite investigating and writing to me, and we've got this group which discuss the things. So some quite learned people coming along with their information, but I feel the responsibility of feeding it back to you what they're saying, really.
Yeah, and I think whilst I can talk about how this is affecting the development industry and how we have an understanding of the water companies agency, ultimately, the district council as a planning authority, we're not responsible for this. So whilst I can give you an overview, that sort of thing needs to be directed to relevant bodies, which is the Environment Agency and the water companies.
I know.
Yes. All right, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Anybody else? No. Right. Thank you very much, Claire. Item 6, green infrastructure update. Chris, please.
With me, I can share. And there we go. So for people who don't know me, my name is Chris Hodsman. I'm an ecologist that sits in the policy team for the council. I want to talk about the green infrastructure strategy today and the work that we've been taking on this in the last year or so in earnest. It's probably worth going back initially to actually saying what green infrastructure is, because it's linked with just about every bit of business the council does, really. So green infrastructure is a network of multifunctional green and blue spaces and other natural features, urban and rural, which are capable of delivering a wide range of environmental, economic, health and well-being benefits for nature, climate, local and wider communities and prosperity. So when you kind of take a step back from that and think about the services we provide, you can see how it interrelates to an awful lot of what we do. This was obviously supposed to be on the agenda last time around. We never quite got around to it. Quite frustratingly, quite a lot has happened in the intervening time. What I plan to do today is probably still give you that same presentation I plan to do in January, because I still want to convey to you what it is we've been doing and what's coming out of it. But what I have added at the end of this is a few slides to kind of give an idea of what's come out in the intervening time and what we're doing about it, really.
Thank you.
Okay, so we undertook a pilot study for this within New Milton. In terms of the assessment works, we divided up the settlement into different areas, as you can see here on the left. For New Milton, this broadly represented landscape character areas, and each one of these areas was then assessed against 4 key themes: accessibility and connectivity, attractive and appealing places, supporting biodiversity, ecological network, and promotion of health and well-being. So each of these 4 themes then had 4 criteria as a subset to those that were assessed against. These are those criteria. I'm not going to go through it in detail,
What I will comment on though is that these have been revised while we've been taking this bit of work. Mainly that's in relation to the declaration of the climate and nature emergency and picking up that theme more strongly, and also the Natural England work that's been coming out as we've gone. So going forward, we'll see net zero, climate change adaptation and resilience, and links to active travel here in the assessment a lot more prominently. In terms of the assessment works itself, the first port of call was undertaking a baseline assessment. We initially set up our own baseline maps. We've got a wealth of information already, and we collated our own maps. Again, whilst this has been going on, Natural England have published their own green infrastructure mapping, and that's been through lots of different iterations through this process. It's actually a really quite strong tool. And as well as the kind of green infrastructure information, we've now got a lot of socioeconomic data coming into it as well, and soon we'll have census information. So we'll be able to drill into a lot of the detail of where the provision is, where the gaps are, and kind of explore why that might be, prioritise action. So going forward, we're not going to do our original data set. We'll use the natural mapping, use that as our basis, but we will augment that with our own local data. So between the two, we should have a really robust data set which we can use as a base. On the right, this is a heat map from Strava. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but it's a way that users can log their runs, walks, hikes, bikes, and we as a council were able to access this data.
That's Slowways, isn't it? I think there's a website called Slowways or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, there's just technology behind it. But
Okay. Yeah, it's something now I use personally to kind of log my bike rides and things like that. But for the use that we intended, they've let us have that data so we can see where people are cycling, walking, when, demographic, and modes of travel, which is thinking with active travel could be really valuable going forward. For me personally, so the officers are going out and doing the field survey, looked at this and helped familiarise your patch in your assessment area before we went out. We found quite a lot of areas that were trafficked and used quite regularly that wouldn't have shown up on the public right-of-way map. It might be people using private land to cut across or otherwise kind of unofficial routes, which whilst we can't count on them, we can make decisions and think about it knowing how they're being used.
Chris, can you describe exactly what we're seeing there in the right-hand map?
Yeah, so
the brown lines are two very distinct black lines.
Yeah, so the idea of this is a heat map. So the darker, bolder, more pronounced ones are the routes most travelled. The lighter, paler ones are those that are less well used. So some of it might be linked towards, particular areas of recreation. Other bits might just be main roads and getting A to B. But you can kind of drill into the detail. It's that's in New Milton. It's just a quick screen grab. But
In Milton.
certainly is.
So the black areas, routes of travel, is it distinctly a particular type of route of travel, like car or bicycle or pedestrian?
So the dashboard that sits behind this is really quite powerful. There's a huge amount of data, so you can sit there and look at year on year. You can look at it by bicycle, by foot, people who are running. And I think
Right,
my
okay.
colleague,
Various layers.
yeah, my colleague Mark, for example, in one of his areas he was surveying, he looked at when some of these things were happening, and there was a real switch off going through. I think it was a cemetery, and it was not lit. So people through the day were taking a shortcut and going through there quite regularly, but when it was unlit, later on, there's a real drop off, and that tracked through the year. Yeah, well, but it tracked through the year with sunset. So when people felt maybe safe going through those areas, so it's not the be all and end all, but it's quite useful context sometimes for some of the work we're doing, just to kind of drill into some of the detail really.
Well, cemeteries lock their gates at sunset.
That might also have some to do with it. I can either confirm or deny.
Good point, Alan, good point.
Okay, so as well as the baseline side, there's also field surveys. We took both a quantitative and qualitative approach to this. So in terms of the quantitative approach, the key themes that we've seen and the areas, they were all assessed, and there's a numerical output that comes from that. So we can see areas that score relatively highly, relatively poorly. So that's that side of things. I've not really presented that here, but we do have that information and intend to present it. On the qualitative side of things, we undertook a SWOT analysis looking at relative strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats for any given area. What we got up on screen is it's condensed down for all themes basically, but I'll pick up a few of the key points that kind of came out of it. So in terms of strengths, looking at a landscape scale in New Milton, the railway line and Beckton Bunny Stream, good effective green corridors that are there already. There's existing New Milton Town Council initiatives and proactivity within the Town Council with areas of wildflower planting and tree planting, which is commendable. And probably shouldn't underestimate the value that private gardens and residences play within the construction network. In terms of weaknesses, I think the signage of walking routes was generally perceived to be quite poor, and it's quite a lack of, from a feeling perspective, a lack of connection to the coast within the settlement. A lot of the green infrastructure lacked identity, structure and interest, and some areas probably just weren't known about or utilised. And where that identity was, I think what we commented on, saw quite a lot, was it was geared around dogs and waste. So, you know, close mown amenity, grassland, bench, and maybe a dog poo bit. You know, it's that kind of set up for a lot of these areas, and was quite formally managed a lot of it. So biodiversity value was quite limited. Opportunities, we've got strategic development sites coming to give more publicly accessible green infrastructure and provide some vital links to be formed. Potential for signage strategy, navigating A to B, but also maybe themed routes. I think the main thing really is New Milton's very well served. You know, it has an awful lot of green infrastructure there. There's a real opportunity to make areas a destination in their own right, providing picnic benches, planting, providing structure and interest, and potentially giving some of this over to community uses like community orchards and things like that. And around New Milton, we commented that actually some really quite high value habitats and grassland areas on the margins. As we'll come on to the kind of creation of green corridors and linking up these high value habitats on the periphery through the towns and settlements, definite opportunity. Threats, looking at potential for vandalism, dog mess, gradual loss of street trees was a concern that came across quite strongly, and perhaps some routes might not be seen as being very welcoming, easily safety concerns. Once the fieldwork was completed, as officers we came together to undertake a moderation exercise, checking that our scoring was consistent across the piece, and also looking for any issues of commonality, so any problems that we identified and also any opportunities, seeing if that was isolated just one area or perhaps settlement wide. And these are the opportunities that kind of came out of these 8 themes. So signage and walking routes, interpretation boards, making green spaces interesting places, improving accessibility for all, pleasant places to sit and enjoy, improved management of accessible woodland, enhancing local biodiversity, enhancement of water features and greening streets. So in terms of the opportunities that we identified as part of this study, there's over 100 initially identified. I think as part of the moderation exercise, this was able to be thinned down to quite a lot, work together more as a strategic goal. So like greening streets, for example, rather than lots of discrete little projects, it was kind of a strategic approach. Also applied a tier system to that, whereby we're looking to kind of identify those opportunities which would give you best bang for your buck. Action. We've got 3 potential projects. I'm mindful of time, so I can skip over any of these, but just to give you a flavour of what will come out of this opportunity-wise. One is Fawcett's Field, which I'm aware New Milton Town Council are doing quite a lot of work on in tandem with us, and some of the work that they've already done and are progressing. If I'm wrong, in terms of a community garden in the east site, tree planting along the south of the site, again providing tree-lined streets. We've got the strategic development site to the northwest of this, so it's key to get the links with those strategic development sites right, and also an NFDC southeast. So there are opportunities for tree planting throughout this area, joining up some of the discrete woodland blocks at the moment. And in terms of the grassland, obviously there's a recreational purpose for a lot of this, but the event space in the southeast is potential to make that diverse grassland and that around the margins of the site as well. Miller's Close, whilst we focused on this one, this could be one of tens of different areas through New Milton. These kind of things are quite well served through New Milton. In terms of what this is at the moment, it's close mown amenity grassland, not really much more there. It's accessed by a narrow alleyway to the north and to the south. Might not even know this is there, but there's real opportunity for perhaps turning this over towards usage, planting community orchards, improving the management or changing the management in there to provide diversity. And this is something that's in NFDC land, so these are things that are completely within our control and our gift to be able to provide these, and they are replicable and quite low cost and involved with these kind of games. Holland's Woods, last one I'll touch on, and I think the first things needed here is just to identify really how this is utilised at the moment more strongly before progressing with anything. There's a goal there, so it is used possibly as a kickabout space. However, in terms of identity, not a huge amount going on. There was some safety concerns possibly with it being open to the north on that bend into the road, coupled with as a kickabout space. Within this, even retaining the kickabout space, there's potential for, again, community uses, community orchards, enhancing the grasslands, providing additional seating and that kind of structured planting for people to kind of make this a destination in its own right. And mature trees along the boundary could be used for plant boxes, and a stream in there could possibly be enhanced. There's all kind of these things. A lot of these measures are replicable elsewhere. There's nothing particularly groundbreaking, but effectively it's giving these places identity and somewhere that people want to go and spend time in their own right. I mentioned about the strategic element of this. The map in the middle is the key areas that we identified where greening streets could be appropriate. From my perspective, in biodiversity terms, I think there's real opportunity for creating these kind of networks and joining nature up through stepping stones to a settlement. There's also very much tie-in with climate change adaptation, resilience, providing flood alleviation, shade, helping to cool our settlements, and also carbon sequestration as well. You see the photo down at the bottom there with the verge. This we saw quite often through New Milton, where it's a pavement, a metre or two strip of close mown grassland, a road, and then the same on the other side. The opportunities providing something like the B road you see there, or the tree planting, providing that network is huge.
You guys mentioned, Chris, that I've noticed a few times now in New Milton in those verges, which of course is Hampshire County Council land. We're getting new trees planted. Are they coordinating with you on this, or is it how they think it's going because for some reason someone's been going on about it?
I think we're not the only people looking at this. This is hot on the agenda of everyone, being a county or district. I think what we're doing, we're going out of this looking at it without any other kind of red tape or anything. So it's going out with a fresh pair of eyes. And the next stage of this will be thinking about who the stakeholders are, who we need to be talking to, and how these things might be delivered.
So it's happening anyway, just by good chance.
It's our direction of travel, definitely, and it's something we want to do our part.
Totally.
Yes, so I didn't get your name.
That's Chris Hodgson.
Oh, right, okay. Thank you. I've been working on a project for probably about the last 3 years. A lot of it was under the radar because NFDC actually took it over legally only in January last year. Okay. But luck with it, I managed to get so many things done. And I know we're trying to do an orchard there. So I want to know who I should be talking to. I mean, Simon Hanley did all the legal stuff, and Byron McGrail's doing all the hard work. But I feel there's something I'm not doing because I'm not getting the publicity, or what you want to call it, publicity. I don't know the group even know about it.
Maybe something that just take offline. make sure. that
Yeah, I
we're
never
joining
feel
up. Yeah.
when I'm supposed to, ask. But yeah, we definitely want something like this.
Okay, Alan?
Thank you. Will this sort of investigation of areas be going all over the forest? Because we've got the new village being built at Calshot.
Mhm.
Almost next door to the site for scientific interest, the Ashlet Creek and the coastal path. This is a wonderful opportunity to link up all the various developments while it's being built rather than trying to go back. Because the water side, everyone says, oh yeah, you've got a refinery. But we've also got large council houses, estates. We've got posh areas as well. There's such a mixture there. I think it's being rather underserved in this sort of interest.
Can I maybe step in? So what Chris is describing is a pilot.
Yeah.
The purpose of it doing a pilot is so that we can get a process that then roll out across the district. For the very reason, identify the opportunity, make sure we're joining things, how we're putting growth, then physically embedded in existing communities rather than there's a new bit of development of existing. So for all the reasons you've described, but it is quite a big project, which is why we wrote this pilot.
Yeah.
And it may be that we that going forward, with different partners to help us do this work, this template, but we needed to get the template working and
know what we're dealing with.
Evening.
Really.
Yeah.
I think the
Just about
next
evening,
kind of step
everybody.
for us internally, just thinking about this. Well, there's a lot of review which will come into in a minute, but it's also doing that stakeholder not engagement, but identifying the key stakeholders from what we've seen, who are the people that we might need to speak to and engage with going forward in this kind of delivery stage.
Board of Parish Council.
On the list, right.
they're on the list.
Is it possible just to ask something?
Mm.
Maybe something you've considered anyway, but doing. Interesting. Are you still open for some suggestions?
What in terms of the kind of actions?
Well, because on one of your slides there, you said you wanted to make somewhere more interesting. And it's just that one of the things that I was having a little like rubbing post trail axle for children. It's quite educational and fun. Children loved it. You don't have to be very big. Just showing like birds, mammals, insects that are within that area, or you're hoping to.
Great idea. So we said about the signage walking routes, and I think it was like picking up things like heritage assets. Like so minded if there's something like that, with picking up urban wildlife and providing more of these things within our settlements. Then that's
Did that at Leaftree Park. Kids going around with their things. I'm doing like grass rubbings.
That's it, yeah. And I don't think they cost. The poster about that high. I don't think they
I really
cost a lot
like that.
either.
I was thinking about, I had the idea of a nature walk, but that's something, that caters for. In terms of just picking up, you said developers and getting tie-in and things. Green infrastructure has definitely grown. Like the guidance that are coming to guidance for so everyone's kind of framework from local authorities, developers, neighbourhood planning. It's all kind of now got a framework available. So everyone's kind of talking the same language and it's flying in together. So this slide or picture on the left here, what we've had available to us while we've been undertaking this work is shown in green. So from National England, we've had this green infrastructure framework, we've had the principles and we've had the mapping. And that's kind of been fed into all the work we've done. What we've only just had since the last meeting to now, the bits in orange. So the Green Infrastructure Standards, Design Guide, Case Studies and Process Journey. That's all come out, and it's a huge amount of work, hundreds of pages of very good and useful information documentation that helps level the playing field with all stakeholders. But in terms of what we're doing now, it's reviewing that, seeing how what we've done sits in that, and really kind of taking stock before we drive forward.
Chris, hang on a second. Dan, did you want to
That's a good question.
Yes, I was just saying, because we're doing the regeneration of Totton, this is the sort of thing, is this the sort of thing that should be done before or during the whole process of planning?
It needs to be very much an integral part of that planning piece. I think it's trying to get to is this isn't just building stuff, it's about creating place and actually in a whole season that. So it needs to be an integral regeneration.
Health, well-being,
Yeah.
social issue. It's just tied in with it.
Yeah.
It might be a good point actually. So this is the green infrastructure standards. There's a few. It's very early days in our review for this. There's a few kind of metrics, say targets. These aren't thou shalt do this, but the kind of things that could be aimed for. So for accessible green space, say requirement to have green infrastructure within. Requirement to have 3 hectares of accessible green infrastructure per 1,000 population, and to have make sure these are decent standard and accessible for. For the urban nature recovery standard, they say there, increase the proportion of green infrastructure that's designed to manage for nature recovery percentage. Setting targets for nature recovery, provision and management of local nature reserves, hectare per nature reserve per 1,000 population. The urban greening factor, making sure that green covers an average of 40% within our settlements. The urban tree canopy, again, making sure it's increased by an agreed percentage. So the main thing that comes out of that, and looking at our study, is looking at the baseline. We haven't got this baseline. We don't know how our settlements currently perform against these kind of measures. So that's something we need to go away and have. But it's quite prescriptive and something that we can change over time. It's usually a theme that comes back to ourselves, seeing where are we going and this to account. You've also got the design guide that's come out. My colleague Jill's kind of had a first kind of pass of this. I think it's a very good kind of companion guide to the National Design Guide and National Model Design Code. It summarises a lot of the standards, including those relating to accessibility, links to the green infrastructure kind of fundamental principles. Jill was particularly pleased to see landscape character reference within this document, making sure that things are locally appropriate, and it gives a real idea of some of the building blocks here and links to exist. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's a great signposting document, existing things. Process journeys. I'm not going to go into this, but basically there's 3 of these. So I mentioned about neighbourhood planning, I mentioned about local authorities, I mentioned about developers. These are 30, 50, 100 pages each, but what they do set out, there's commonality between it. If you're a developer, if you're a local authority, if you're they're all linked together. So the way that we push these things. So on first pass, I think they'd be a useful document, but it does seem like it could be a full-time job for someone, to be honest, like looking at this and making sure it's implemented. In terms of going forward for us, it's very much looking at what we've done, looking at what's come out and taking stock, thinking about where we go with this, how we progress it. Very happy to come back with one of the officers working on this to kind of feedback where direction of travel on it. But yeah, haven't got that in concrete at the moment. But come back once we've dealt through this.
Right, Chris. Thank you very much. We'll stand by, shall we?
Waiting with bated breath.
This was chosen by Claire especially.
Sue, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, my patch is Marchwood.
Okay.
We have some open space 106 monies, which we've been trying to do, paths, signage, all manner of things. It's stalled. I won't bore you with the details as to why. And I realise this is a pilot scheme that you've done at Milton, but are you going to try and look at other areas? So the fact that really what I suppose I'm trying to ask is, how can I rejuvenate these ideas that to spend this money? Would your services help to try and rejuvenate that and get it going, or are we looking at 2 separate routes?
I think that what we've done so far has been very much going out with a fresh pair of eyes and having a look, not necessarily at this stage concerned with the delivery, but ultimately that's something that you want to follow on from this.
And that needs money and
It's looking at it and working through the process. So
Yeah.
I think, we've gone out, rather than sitting there and scratching your head, we've gone out and done it. And now we're using that as the basis for discussion to see, well, what kind of thing do we look to deliver and what might we need to do that. So they're the kind of discussions that will be ultimately happening now. In terms of Marchwood and elsewhere, it's very much settlement focused. So this element of green infrastructure, that there's a district-wide vision of this, but for the settlements alone, there's definitely plans to work through settlements and with that, buy-in with parish councils, people know their own patch better than, have had very productive meetings with new members and through the pilot.
so that would be the way
Yeah,
through
that buy-in,
to have a discussion and take it from there, bearing in mind they've got this money which is not being used.
We had one at the outset, report back our initial findings, specifics. So that seems to work quite well, and your patch better than anyone.
Give me a direction of travel. Thank
It was useful, I think, a neighbourhood plan to actually start off with as well. That identified a lot of the environmental improvements we wanted to make. So it's a very happy time.
Well, doing a lot of good work already. So
Chris, the secret to your work presumably actually is funding more than anything else.
Definitely. So, part of the reason to do this is to identify the more delivery path, but there are parishes and that will funds still going back to the strategic development.
That was my next question.
Yeah, and then as a council, taking aside that still may be another reiteration of the planning system, but in today's money, we will, as a district council, still funding and projects that are identified and deliverable. So, this together with a lot going on will have some of those projects that could be delivered through still going forward, or other, there are national pots that come out at short notice, projects that are up and ready to go. It's similarly, we're in a discussion and thought around report rates, projects that maybe through that. We don't have the projects that are way to get into the
we've got still, haven't we?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're living with.
Yeah.
Is still time restricted.
No, still isn't time restricted.
You can spend it by so and so, or it's unlimited.
No, still is effectively a roof tax that comes to.
We're not going to have every parish out the front door lined up trying to get onto Chris's schemes because the facility's running out.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Where, this is part of a suite of work that's going on. Then maybe discussions about how we spend still going forward once we start to get it. Because the developments are starting to.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got the schemes, then you can get the SIL money in the developments. Gotcha. Okay, right. Thanks, Chris. Are you complete?
I am.
Thank you very much. Thank you for making it so short. Sorry, panel members, I brought Chris on an item earlier, unfortunately, because my script sheet wasn't correct. So we will do number 6 now. New Forest Visitors Centre. James, will you take over, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to escape there as well, thinking I'd got away with it, but
not quite.
Yeah. Thank you, members. This was another presentation that was deferred from back in January, with the intention really of giving you all an update and a clue, and also the planning context of this New Forest Visitor Study. Essentially, it's the issue of the visits on the New Forest designated sites, so the nature conservation aspects of the New Forest, and specifically the levels that are likely to occur of visits in connection with future new development around the New Forest as a whole. So not just our district, but the wider area. This is work that's been in the public domain since probably the end of 2019, at which point there was various engagements and discussions with the relevant members of the council at that time. It's also been reflected in our the work of our policy planning team, including it was briefly introduced back at the Environmental and Review Scrutiny panel back in 2021 in the context of our local plan and supplementary document at that time. So really, this is just a presentation that's really a refresher of the key findings. It's quite interesting. The overall study conclusions, and then really what's happening now, where we're going to next with it. So just to give you a bit of the background, because it's a big subject. There's lots of different issues on visits in the New Forest, some related to planning, others not. So the reason why we're interested in the policy planning team and planning generally is it's something that's required through legislation, habitat regulations we've heard about, national policy, the MPPF and so on, which protect internationally designated habitats. And this is something we have to reflect in our own local planning policies, in our adopted local plan from 2020. We, obviously, as a local planning authority, have a duty to protect the integrity of these sites. And sort of fundamentally, this is what we're about here, really. See, the planning system itself is looking at all elements of sustainable development. You've got economic, social, and environmental, and really this is both obviously the environmental aspect, but also as part of the mitigation of this issue, we provide alternative areas, alternative mitigation, alternative open spaces. So it sort of links perhaps to the green infrastructure and alternative areas that the local residents knew and the new residents can go and use. So there's benefits to this work as well as just the pure protection of these designated sites. But as I say, this is something our council have had in our local plan since 2014. So it's an issue that we as a district have been involved with for some time now. But it is a strategic issue, and other councils, so the likes of the Dorset, BC, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, Dorset, and across the Solent to Southampton, have looked at different levels. So this is really about bringing an evidence base together. That means all the councils in the area that have the same impact that we do here in the forest approach it in the same way, with the same weight. So just a quick reminder of where the issues are, where the work of the study is really being focused. Obviously, we've got our district plan area, so our local plan area is the blue around the edge. The national park boundary is the kind of golden yellow colour, but the actual designated sites, sites that are designated for their nature conservation importance. You see the acronyms you may well have seen before: SPAs, SAC, and Ramsar sites. Essentially special protection areas for protected species or habitats, and this is what the habitat regulations effectively protect, and what we have to keep ensure the integrity is remained. So in terms of the actual study itself, back in 2018 it was a partnership of 6 local planning authorities that included Eastleigh, New Forest District ourselves, the National Park Authority, Test Valley, Southampton and Wiltshire councils, successful in gaining a planning delivery fund grant. And this was a national grant that was supported by Natural England and made available to support development, future development housing sites, or housing growth, should I say, in areas that have development constraints. So it's a way of managing a constraint and ensuring that the impacts are mitigated. This is perhaps a research that represented the first comprehensive study of its kind. So it's probably back in 2004, this time it was last looked at in a holistic way. Other work had been done since then, but this is the first time it's been looked at as a single issue rather than individual councils doing their own thing. And I say its primary purpose was to update the evidence and enable planning authorities to undertake a more coordinated and consistent approach to ensure that when new development does happen, it does not have that adverse effect on the new forest. So the initial phase was to provide the detailed evidence of how the forest is used, and then to inform further analysis of what those actual recreational impacts are. So just a quick look at the timeline at the back there. So started in 2018 and initially sort of published in 2020, and then I'll come to in a minute something called a zonal influence report, which used that initial evidence to take that forward. So the actual study itself and what's now happened is effectively it was visitor survey. So it's the partnership of six local authorities commissioned specialist consultants, Footprint Ecology, who undertake this sort of visitor study work. And what they undertook was a data gathering exercise to enable what the types of visitors, what their kind of their makeup were, who visited the New Forest, whether they're local residents, leisure day visitors, staying visitors, where they originated from, where they're visiting, whereabouts in part they're actually visiting, how they arrived there, and what sort of activities they did, what facilities they used, and so on. So it was a very comprehensive, robust methodology. A very sort of statistically significant sample was gained through the surveys, which I'll come on to in a bit more detail in a minute. So probably some of the key findings. There were 6 fairly long studies, reports that were prepared as part of this work. Awful lot of data in there that it's all still available, publicly available on our website. So you can drill down all the detail, all the survey results, etc. But in terms of some of the headlines for some of the different surveys that were undertaken. So telephone survey. So over 2,000 people were telephone surveyed, or interviews were undertaken within 25 kilometres of the national park boundary. And this was really to give a kind of objective view of people who weren't necessarily visiting, found in the national park themselves. Therefore, they've already made that visit already. It is more about people sort of cold called effectively and asked about their visits to the New Forest. Interestingly, out of this geographical area, over 70% had said that they had visited the New Forest in the last year, with walking being one of the key uses there. One of the other studies that was undertaken was car park counts, number of vehicles counted. So actually all the car parks around the New Forest, a consistent approach was taken to go around and count the cars on different days of the year, different times of day, etc. What this probably found was out of all the 270 odd parking sort of locations that they identified, those probably in the more central sort of what we say touristy areas, the Boulderwoods, the Lyndhursts and so on, were certainly the busiest, as well as those in the proximity to the urban areas around the periphery. So there's 2 key areas which showed they were the greatest used, and perhaps we come on in a minute, you'll see how that then connects in with some of the other data that was collected. So another key volume of this study was the actual visitor surveys. So those were taken to people who actually arrived in the forest at the various car parks and other locations around the actual New Forest designated sites themselves. 5,000 face-to-face interviews were taken across 60 points in total. And again, probably the main highlight here was out of all those that were interviewed, dog walking was the main reason that people used those particular points of the New Forest, 55% in this case, with walking after sort of 26% after that. To say that walking could be someone out for a walk that happened to have a dog, as opposed to people that went specifically to walk their dog. And then just to kind of sort of display that on a map, again, you may not be able to see this too clearly, but this is really looking at the geographical extent for the reasons for visiting. And again, each of these pie charts are one of the various 60 access points at the points that they surveyed. Just to explain the colours, the dog walking is the kind of the browny rusty colour, with walking the light green. So again, it really just confirms that the majority of the site, particularly around the periphery of the forest, are used for that dog walking purpose. Highlighted the waterside area here as the greater number of activities. There's more people accessing the forest in those areas. And then in terms of the frequency of visits, again, the bigger the pie chart, the more visits. And in this case, the darker red the colour, the more frequent the visits that people that were surveyed took. So the very, very dark red is actually people who said that they visit that site more than once a day to walk a dog or what have you, down to sort of daily to most days, and the other red. So again, you can also look at different areas here, but I chose the waterside again as a good example, again, of the high level of visits and the high frequency. I'd say different to perhaps some of those sites within the centre. Again, all this is useful information in terms of how we understand the forest is used, and then when we come to the mitigation of it, we've got a better idea. So in terms of the actual total number of visits, using all the sort of survey data and extrapolating all the information, it's considered around about 5 to 6 million years. 5 to 6 million years, apologies. 5 to 6 million visits. That's my geology coming out there. Sorry. 5 to 6 million visits, including repeat visitors, were estimated in these designated sites, these special areas of the forest. Just as a context, the kind of current estimates of total visits to the New Forest, so that's your beaches, a case for other tourist attraction, is in the region of 15 million. So it's less, but it's still significant. But what this report study was also looking at is the potential for delivery of new dwellings, new residential development in the 25-kilometre area, and what that potentially would mean in terms of increase in visits. So basically using how people currently use a forest per household, and what would happen with the increase in dwellings. And what that effectively means is over the period up to 2036, there'd be in the region of about 16% increase in properties within that 25-kilometre area. So that's all the local planning authorities. And what that would result in is around about 11.4% increase in visitors. And that's important in terms of policy planning, because that means we can understand how much more visitors we will need to mitigate for in our new developments. In terms of the influence, so how significant the influences of this new development and how the residents, in terms of how many people visit from proximity, the kind of zone of influence was calculated using this data to just over 13 kilometres, 13.8 kilometres precisely, which was to do with the percentile of visits. And this is seen as like where the catchment would be have a significant impact for those developments that would take place within that. What we use that for is therefore the basis for the very relevant planning authorities in there. Probably can't quite see that there, since it's dark black dotted lines, but it shows the BCPs, Dorsets, etc., and elements of their district. But it's effectively a basis for those authorities to provide mitigation within their new development, much as our strategic sites we have coming forward in our development provide alternative natural recreational green space, and they provide other contributions. So it's having a solid evidence base to ensure that other local authorities are doing the same as that. So what the study then, with this information and understanding where the impact was coming from, was also looking at what the impacts were. And it really identified a range of the potential future impacts from this recreational use of the forest from visitors. again, a lot of it is perhaps what we knew already from past studies, but it's good to have it kind of confirmed and yeah, that we are on the right track. So it's things like disturbance of the breeding habitat for ground nesting birds, fire, so loss of habitat, contamination from fouling and so on, trampling and wear and from people walking over the habitat. So it's all sorts of things that by providing mitigation alternative areas for people to go to, that those impacts can be managed and hopefully reduced. What the report also did is also provide a range of avoidance and mitigation measures that we can use to minimise that. And that includes, as I say, our alternative natural recreational green space, and also access management of the sites themselves through rangering and education and so on. And what the report also did was recommend a strategic and proportionate and coordinated approach to this mitigation, which is what sort of been happening now, and that's where we really get to the next steps now. So finally, and just to kind of just show you where the work is going now. So this study is a solid evidence base, and it's being used, say, by ourselves and other local authorities already as they're progressing their local plans and their policies to protect the New Forest. This work is continuing through various steering groups, and there's now memorandum of understanding which sort of commits us to continue this sort of this joint work effectively. Doesn't commit the New Forest at all to a specific approach or how we deliver that mitigation, only that we do it in a coordinated way, and it works at meeting with this joint evidence base. The other piece of work is this, what we say, access management and monitoring, strategic access and management and monitoring, and you may hear it sort of referred to as a SAM. What this is effectively is the actual management of visits on the sites themselves. So if rangers going out speaking to people on these sites, perhaps they are letting a dog off a lead at a particularly sensitive time of year, for instance, and educating people using these sites. What the evidence has been showing is, whilst we can provide recreational green space part of our new developments through greenway projects, through our supplementary planning documents and so on, there's a certain amount of visitors still going to go to the forest. So we need to make sure that we take account of that. And what we're looking at doing now is, again, ensuring that this work is done in a consistent, coordinated way. What we do in our council is we collect money from your development to pay for a ranger service that does this work, and it's making sure that work that we do fits in with what other local authorities are doing as well, and they're proportionately doing the equivalent work based on what development they have coming forward in their local planning areas. So to conclude, really, that this work is sort of continuing over the course of this year. There'll be a further report that will recommend what this sort of study should do, what this access management and monitoring should do, and then we can look at this and take it forward into future local plan reviews and future work that we do in a policy planning team. So I think that's probably where we're at the moment. So happy to take any queries or questions.
Right, James, thank you.
Thank you, James. I had an interesting Teams meeting which Claire authorised with David Hurd, and it was very much from the woman that runs the behaviour and training companies that are trying to get dogs to behave better. It was felt that we needed better reporting, so I think Claire had already concluded that before the meeting, but it was, so I think David Hurd is changing the website, but the thing on that you've just mentioned was a presence in the car parks, because people that are not very nice are saying to those that are trying to say, don't spoil this for everybody else, for your dog being out of control. They're saying there's no rules, there's no laws, nobody ever tells you what to do. So David Hurd knew that he was going to look into a presence of going around the car parks. And I think that it was to say, it's a privilege to be able to go out in our forest, but we must be careful that we don't let dogs go out of control like they are currently. And long leads are going to be something that I think the the dog behaviour woman and David Hurd said must be brought in, because you can't have these, because when they're at a sense of heightened excitement, no matter how well trained they are, they're still going up to the people that are not walking dogs or the horse riders or whatever. And so that was a meeting I had only this week, actually.
Interesting, yeah, and just to come back on that, that's precisely what our ranger service that we fund is there to do. Obviously, it's one person that can't be everywhere, but the idea is they'll sort of rotate around some of the more sort of populated car parks, and that's it. It's there to advise, and the feedback we get is 9 times out of 10. Most people aren't aware that they're causing an issue. So
95% of people are fine, and I think that was the aim, is that they do see that there are rules, and not rules as much as some places, but that they do need to be implemented, and know that they will get into trouble if they continue. So they want to identify the regular ones that are causing trouble.
It's probably just worth mentioning as well, just to feed in, because we've also got the Bird Aware initiative across the wider Solent area. So similarly, we have warden presence along the coastline in places like sort of key havens, and sort of managing, trying to encourage people within that area who have dogs to behave responsibly. Their dogs to behave responsibly. It's probably actually what I'm saying.
I think Derek Darling, I think it is, he's unfortunately away, but he's going to come and give talks to people.
Yeah, so Derek as well, in David's team, sort of connects in with the Bird Aware rangers as well, to make sure that they're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, maybe we could ask him to pop in here. He's back.
Thank you. Derek, you want to go?
Probably what we need here is much more explicit signage in the car parks, so that people are aware, of it. I mean, I know there is some signage in some car parks. Perhaps it needs to be just more streamlined and more explicit, so that people are aware. And also, I mean, if there are some very sensitive areas, birds nesting at certain times, you have to perhaps close those car parks if they're very close to those sites, and people go elsewhere.
National park.
That just really makes sense.
Yeah. Alan.
Yeah, I think we have to highlight the areas of where birds are breeding. So to be fair on dogs that have been with humans for God knows how many years, but Chihuahua, which doesn't cause much nuisance. But we need areas where dogs can go out and exercise and run. At the moment, there's no way of telling which is which. So I know National Park do close off where they've got really sensitive areas, put signs up. But they're so confusing that you need a degree in ornithology to understand.
Yeah, it needs to be much clearer, doesn't it?
It wants to be bullet points, not scientific explanations.
Simple rules.
Certainly something that this work is looking at, and part of this strategic access management monitoring is looking at ensuring there's kind of consistent sort of messaging from all the different different sort of stakeholders within the national park. Our ranger, the national parks rangers, birders, etc. So, but yeah, just to make it clear, and to ensure they do steer people to the least sensitive locations.
For someone who lives outside the national park, one of the best parts of the forest, outside the national park, they don't keep on fiddling about with it.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Sue, you wanted a word?
Yes. What we're talking about here is the really sensitive parts of the forest, which are all within the boundary of the national park. And you've got various people looking after that. National Park is one, Forestry England's another, and you've got the commoners, and you've got the birders, and so on and so forth. Certainly in bird nesting time, that they do put signs out. They don't close anything off in the forest. Certainly don't close but they do close car parks in the winter time, and that's the Forestry England do that, and that's purely because in the winter time some of these car parks take a bit of a bashing, and so they want them closed off for them to recover a bit, but they're all marked off where they do close them off. But this footprint ecology survey was extremely good. I remember, I think it was a national park. We had a whole presentation on it, and I think I've still probably saved a lot of the things. Can we access this online on NFDC's?
I think it's,
or is it the national park?
it's actually hosted by the National Park, but we do have links to say kind of overlapping. But our I'm almost certain our website links us over. But
so a lot of these charts you've shown us, we could find on there, could we?
Absolutely.
Or
yeah.
were you going to send us these charts anyway?
Well, I could very happily perhaps circulate the link to the full document.
That would be useful.
Yeah, perhaps.
Because there's a lot of information on there, and I don't know about anybody else, but that screen's a long way away today. And
yeah.
It'd be nice to see the detail of it.
Yeah, and I think it gives them all the context. Obviously, I've given a few just that
particularly in areas where we individually are interested.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, no, but happy to circulate. Thank you, Chris. James, sorry. Okay, everybody else happy? Thank you, James. Item 8 is the work programme. We've got your paper with your agenda. At the moment, it is what it is. The next meeting is 15th of June and then the 7th of September. I think with the advent of an election, it's probably worthwhile leaving officers to add anything that's necessary for the 15th of June and then leave a new panel to agree the way forward. It does say waste programme update on both of those, and you'll have noticed for the first time for years we're having a panel meeting without an update, although Chris, in all his loyalty to us, has turned up anyway. Did you want to say anything, Chris, about your updates?
No, I think only really that since we've updated in January, where we presented sort of a revised timeline for rollout of the strategy, taking into account the bringing forward of the garden waste rollout to spring next year. Since then, we've really been working on sort of implementing that revised timeline and that revised project plan. So there was no new information as such to present to the panel today, hence it not being on the agenda for today. But in the event that we hear from government in the intervening period between now and the next panel, in terms of government's next steps, that will be an important update to give at the next meeting. So we'll look to certainly have it back on the agenda.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for turning up, even though we weren't necessary. We'd have missed your smiley face. Right. Last time is item 9. Anything major or urgent? No, I don't. Other than this is the last panel meeting to be attended by our illustrious planning leader or head of department, whatever likes Claire. Who has loyally supported us over the years and backed us up and put us right and well, kept us in some detail up to date with the numerous changes in planning and regulations that are going on. You've been extremely helpful to the panel, so on behalf of us all, thank you very much indeed. And well, good luck in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, I now declare the meeting closed.